The land. Urban land is covered with buildings and roads. It's also known as a city, and it has 2,500 people or more. Rural land is open space. Forest land has harvesting wood, wildlife, fish, and nuts, as well as timber. Problems associated with it are deforestation, which is caused by agriculture, and the solution to this problem would be reforestation. Rangeland is land used to graze livestock and wildlife, so like grasslands, shrublands, and deserts. Problems associated are overgrazing, which lead to desertification, and solutions would be to allow the replenishment of land or fence the area. Croplands are used to grow crops, are called farmlands. Problems associated with it are pesticides and fertilizers, and a solution would be organic methods. Parks and preserves are used for recreation and enjoyment. They're the preservation of native animals as well. And wilderness is usually inside of this, and that is land protected. And problems associated with it are the urbanization close to the park, and the solutions to that problem would be more laws to protect them. Food security is having daily access to enough nutritious foods. Food insecurity is hunger and malnutrition. The root causes are overpopulation, which is poverty, agriculture, distribution, and politics. In the past, there was enough food to feed the world, but it was not distributed evenly. Today, even if we even distributed the food, there would be malnourished people. In more developed countries, half the caloric intake is from meat, fish, oil, which is high intake of food and low activity, where in less developed countries, it's 3/4 of the caloric intake is from carbs. Undernourished means that you're hungry, but malnourished means you have deficits in proteins or nutrients. Famines are severe shortages of foods in areas which lead to starvation, death, and economic chaos, and they're caused by drought, crop failure, flooding, war. Food production, whereas cropland is 77% of food that comes from 11% of land, rangeland and pastures, 16% of food that comes from them only makes up 22% of the land. Ocean, so like fish and aquacultures, is 7% of the food, but it comes from 70% of Earth. So there's a big disparity between these numbers. In feeding the world, most produced foods in the world come from agriculture or farming. So wheat is first, then rice, then corn, then potatoes. 47% of calories come from wheat, rice, and corn. The food production goal is to increase yields, like the amount of food produced in a given area, increase sustainability, and increase efficiency. Subsistence farming is traditional farming to make enough food for your family and maybe a little bit more. It's man and animal powered. There's self-irrigation, manure to fertilized plants, and pesticides and weeding is removal. Traditional intensive is to make food for self and to sell. Methods increase efficiency. They shift to irrigation. Pesticides are sprayed with planes, inorganic fertilizers, and they introduce the method. Sustainable farming is usually done through two methods nowadays. So polyculture, which is where you grow several crops on the same land, implementing the biodiversity principle. Low polyculture produces higher yields than high monoculture. And the other method is slash and burn, where you burn forests for soil nutrients and use the land for crops until depletion and then allow them to regenerate. Industrialized farming is you sell and export. It's like traditional intensive, but they use increased water, fertilizer, pesticides, yield, and energy use. So it's a decrease in efficiency because they're using so much more of everything else. U.S. uses 17% of all commercial energy on food production, and the food production is crops plus livestock. The Green Revolution was first started in India as 25 years ago. Crop yields increased through the development of monoculture, so crossbred GMO crops, which is genetically modified organisms. It allowed India and Asia to be self-sufficient. The first Green Revolution was in 1950 to 1970, and the second is going on now. The problems associated with it are increased use of fertilizers, energy, pesticides, and water. It takes 10 units of fossil fuels to produce 1 unit of food energy, and the negative impact on subsistence farmers who only grow enough food for local use. It's making them harder to live and feed themselves. GMOs, or genetically modified organisms, are crossbred through artificial selection. The genetic engineering is referred to as a transgenic organisms. They make organisms resistant to heat and cold, herbicides, pests, parasites, diseases, drought, and salty or acidic soils. An advantage would be higher yields and growing faster. A disadvantage would be a low diversity and new allergens. Meat growth and consumption growth is steady, and the production increased fourfold from 1961 to 2007. Feedlots, an advantage one would be more meat and high profits. A disadvantage would be more greenhouse gases and a large amount of waste. For aquaculture, it's the fastest growing food production in the world, but a high disadvantage is, or an advantage is high profits and low fuel. Let me just redo. Sustainable living and planning is when new urbanism is been created and it's building environmentally friendly city, so making it more walkable with parks and open areas, using renewable resources to build houses, or making them more efficient so they're not wasting energy, with quality urban design, and with smart transportation. So this is an electric bus, or you're having more fuel efficient transportation in the city.